Welcome to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast. Each week, we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe, offering exclusive insights, inspiration, and guidance to help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in the early years. Hello, my name is Ruth Lue-Quee, your host for this week's TTS Talking Early Years podcast. I'm an educational consultant, also known as My Mummy Teacher, founder of MMT Play, and I'm passionate about inclusion and play. Throughout this series, we'll be discussing a range of topics aimed at supporting SEN in the early years, inspiring you with guidance and resources to enhance your practice. I'm delighted to introduce Anna Speke as today's guest. Welcome to the podcast, Anna. How are you today?
Hi, Ruth. Thank you very much for having me. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Nice day. We've got a bit of snow around us, haven't we? Before we get started, could you please give a quick introduction about yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Anna. I'm an education officer at the charity nasen. So we are the National Association for Special Educational Needs. And as part of that role, I lead on our early years work, supporting the early years workforce, basically, to support children and their families in lots of ways, so training, resources, support. I'm also a SENCO and a teacher, and I've worked in various specialist and mainstream settings, mainly in Birmingham and the West Midlands. I'm also a forest school leader, so that holistic relationship-based learning is really important for me. So I absolutely love being a supporter and champion of early years practitioners. So it's a privilege to be here. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. I'm so excited because you've got so much expert knowledge and experience that we're going to be able to tap in. And I know our listeners are going to go away with some amazing golden nuggets today. So in the first episode, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at strengthening SEN support internally. So we're going to examine the key roles of key persons, teachers, TAs, SENCOs, everyone. There's a big list, isn't there? Everybody that works within our early years settings. So ultimately, we want to think about how they can work together to really effectively support our children that have got a special educational needs. So what are the sorts of key roles? Who are the professionals that you're working with within early years, and how do they all work together?
Naturally. So I think the key point to start off with is that support for all children, including those with SEN and additional needs, is everybody's responsibility across the setting. And I think that's the first thing we've got to say from the outset, really. Every single member of staff is there to support all of the children, including those who might have additional needs. So that means everybody from lunchtime supervisors to people working in the office, if that's relevant in a particular context, we all have that responsibility. And if we're a childminder, they want to alienate the childminders working on their own. Of course, they've got responsibility for all areas and need to think about that for all elements of what we do in kind of when we're wearing all the hats as well. So, everyone needs to comply with all those duties legislatively and morally, obviously, and make sure that we have that inclusive practice, provision, environments, and make those reasonable adjustments for children. And that also, there's no delay in doing that. So we need to work together to make sure that we are doing that as quickly as we possibly can. We know that makes a massive difference to children, don't we? Kind of that early support and early identification. So that's kind of the first point, that we're all responsible, regardless of what our role is.
Absolutely.
But then, sorry, carry on.
No, absolutely. That is such a key point, that every single person is responsible. I really, really agree with that.
Yeah. And then I think in terms of the individual roles, key person is obviously a really key one. So key person, teacher, teaching assistants, all there to support all of the children, to remove barriers to learning and to development. So those people will be the ones working with children on that day-to-day basis, so implementing and overseeing kind of interventions or additional support, making sure that learning and care is tailored to meet need, really planning an enjoyable, challenging experience for all of the children, deciding what we want the children to learn and how to get there, seeking to engage parents and carers, linking families with outside agencies. So that's kind of the key person teacher or teaching assistant role, depending on context and whether you're in a mainstream setting or a PVI. And we'd obviously do that with support and guidance from the SENCO. So talking a little bit about them as well, I guess. So SENCO, SEN coordinator, having responsibility for coordinating that provision across the setting. So for supporting those colleagues, building those relationships, and making sure that everybody understands their responsibilities and they know the settings approach to identifying need and to meeting need, offering advice, offering support to colleagues and to families, and talking to other professionals and building those relationships as well. Yeah. So I think it's the SENCO, and making sure that the SENCO is the person who is, as it says in the name, coordinating that provision. It's not down to the SENCO to kind of suddenly take responsibility for all the children with an additional need. They are there to support and to coordinate that provision.
Amazing. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So essentially, your teachers, your practitioners, your childminders, they're responsible for the day in, day out on the ground, the reasonable adjustments that they're putting in, the interventions that they're running, making sure those things are happening day in, day out. That is their responsibility. And creating that inclusive environment, inclusive classroom, inclusive setting through, the activities that they're providing, the environment that they're providing. And then with our SENCO, I always think as well, like as SENCOs quite often, or historically even, like staff would come to you and think you've got this magic wand, I've got this child and I'm really not quite sure what to do. I want to support them. I don't know how. Can you do this? And it's sort of like, I wish I had a magic wand, but I don't have a magic wand. Like, it's not the SENCO's job to put the provision in place. It is the teacher's job or the practitioner's job to do that. And like you're saying, that SENCO, their role is to oversee that, to guide that, to ensure things that we are saying are in place, the accountability side of things, championing for that child and making sure that child is getting that provision that they absolutely require. And I think a key part of that is whichever role you are doing within the early years setting, collaboration is absolutely paramount for ensuring that we're meeting the needs of the children that are in the setting. So what sorts of tips do you give and guidance to any early years staff about how they can promote that teamwork to ensure that the needs of children within their settings are being met?
So, yeah, I think ethos is absolutely key. I mean, to me, relationships are everything, and ethos is absolutely key. So ideally, coming from that leadership down, that we are an inclusive, collaborative setting, we've got a shared vision, and that's really clearly communicated as well within kind of a setting as a whole, but also within individual teams within that setting. I think a lot of it is about remembering we're all there for the same reason, aren't we? We all got into education for a reason, presumably to support, I would hope, to support children and families. So at times, we might have differing opinions, but if we can come back to that fact, that's going to help us to communicate more clearly. So we need to have that professional respect, that mutual respect, that sense of a shared responsibility, and also having the confidence as well that we're skilled in early years and what we do. And that's something that I think sometimes in the practitioners I speak to, they don't always kind of put that. I hear so many people saying, I'm just a childminder or I'm just an early years practitioner. No, it's such an important job. It's not a just job. It's absolutely amazing thing to do. And it's such a key, important role that actually the more we can build that confidence with training, reading, research, podcasts like this, and be committed to developing our confidence and our understanding, the more we can hopefully build our pride and our confidence in shouting about what we do as well, which I think is so important.
I love that, what you just said as well about building up their confidence, and what you've just said about being just a practitioner or just a teaching assistant. There's no just about it. Honestly, there's so many childminders, practitioners, TAs, teachers out there. I see that. I'm like, you are so skilled. The needs that you are meeting within this environment that you don't even realize how talented and how skilled you are because you're doing it like second nature. And so you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there.
I think another thing is the language we use is really important, and that feeds into those relationships and that collaborative working and that ethos as well. So, using that supportive, inclusive language, modeling that, and actually also supportively challenging those who aren't talking about children or families or colleagues appropriately, externally facing, but also internally. We all know there's those people in the staff room who might have a bit of a moan, and there's a place for a bit of a I'm finding this tricky conversation, but we just need to be really mindful of the language we're using around that, I think, and that's a really important part of that collaborative ethos as well.
Absolutely. So if practitioners are, they hear somebody within their setting using language that's not appropriate, or perhaps they're not being like neurodiversity affirming, then who would they go to? Would they then go to the SENCO? Is that something that would fall under the SENCO's role for them to get guidance and support on how they support that within their culture?
I think it depends on the context of your setting and what type of setting you're working in. I think and it depends on relationships, obviously. I think it's fine to challenge supportively without judgment ourselves. So if we can have those conversations and say, is there a reason why you're referring to, we can't judge people using that language because it might be that they don't know other language to use. Language as well changes so quickly, doesn't it? So, what you don't want is people not to want to talk about things because they're worried they're going to use the wrong word. So actually, if we can just have those conversations openly in the first place, then that's really useful without judgment. But then if there is an issue, then I think, potentially it is SENCO or leadership. It depends on the structure within the setting, within each context, I think, really.
I think that's really useful. And I think to add to that sort of effective team collaboration, one of the key things is people understanding who does what and having that set out clearly, because quite often people don't know what their role is or what's the SENCO's role, or the lines can become blurred. And actually, if we've got clear roles, we've got clear responsibilities, we've also got sort of clear boundaries in place. If you're listening to this and you're the SENCO, that's really important in terms of your well-being and the overload and wanting to help everybody, but you've got to sort of pour into your practitioners so that they can help. It's not down to your responsibility. That's all part of that effective team collaboration, people understanding what they're doing and knowing what their key roles are within that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I completely agree. And I quite often hear when we talk about, sometimes I'll do a bit of a brainstorm if I'm doing training around, what does effective communication look like? And people will sometimes say an open door policy. And yes, but also you've got to have boundaries within that, because you hear so often about practitioners or SENCOs, replying to emails at 11 o'clock at night, and that's not good for their well-being. So yes, an open door policy, but within there have to be boundaries to make sure that we are looking after ourselves at the same time. And I think as well, a real awareness needs to be there that no one is expected to know everything. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So building is actually more about building the confidence to know who we can go to, and we need a little bit of support. So it might be internally as a team of colleagues, or outside agencies or organisations that can offer a bit of support or guidance or resources. So even as a SENCO, you can't know everything. It's impossible. So when people do come to you, you've got to have the confidence to say, actually, I'm not sure, but I can find out for you, and to know where you can then go and investigate.
Absolutely. Thank you ever so much. I think that's a really great place to end this first discussion. And I think the biggest takeaway from this one is emphasising that message that every single adult within that setting is responsible for children with special education or additional needs. And that's a key theme that we're going to keep going forward with that other chat. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'd like to say a huge thank you to our guest, Anna, for joining us and providing such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Ruth Lue-Quee, and Anna Speke. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, including ideas for your settings and links to relevant resources.